Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight. The press at odds with the American public over the Second Amendment. That is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. First, I want to tell you a personal story. Back in the 1980s, when I was a correspondent at ABC News, there was a plane crash that killed the parents of a young girl. I was assigned to talk with the teenager to get so-called reaction, and I did my job. But the pain on her face was so intense that I vowed never again to interview a victim so soon after a tragedy, and I have kept that vow. This week, the media was all over the Navy Yard massacre in Washington, and some in the liberal press used the murders to advance their anti-gun agenda. Awful. But not only that, they were wrong in what they reported.
We are reporting here at CNN just this hour that an AR-15 used in some of those recent horrific mass shootings was used again in this one.
Sources say with that assault rifle, which we believe to be an AR-15, Alexis essentially was a sniper.
How does a guy walk into a facility like that with an AR-15, a double-barrel shotgun and a handgun and go unnoticed?
The AR-15 that was used today was used in Newtown. It was used in Aurora. It's been used in almost all of the mass shootings in the last 2 years or so in America.
I don't know how that happens, but when the media erroneously reports something, instead of checking it out, some ideological politicians jump to exploit the fallacy.
Well, Ben Ferguson, just reading your tweet 11 minutes ago, you said, Piers Morgan thinks the gun used today is the problem and should be banned. I think today is proof that anti-gun ideas are a total failure. How on earth do you justify that tweet?
Well, look at D.C. First of all, in D.C., you're not allowed to own any semi-automatic rifle. It's been against the law for a long time. So this gun shouldn't have been there based,
where did he buy the AR-15?
Well, we don't
Ben,
know where he bought it.
Where did he buy it? No, we do know where he bought it.
We don't know.
It's
We don't know
if he,
first of all, you're assuming,
it has emerged,
you're assuming
Ben,
he bought it.
No,
you're
I can't let you,
I can't
let you go on. No, he didn't steal it.
Why can't you let me go on? Do you know that he bought it?
Because I'm telling you a fact, Ben. He bought it legally in Virginia. Legally in Virginia. This is the problem with America's gun laws. It's not legal where he did the act. It's legal round the corner. There's no federal ban on AR-15s, so that's why they keep being used.
All right, but in D.C. today, he broke the law, bring in. Second thing is, you can't even have a permit to carry a gun, a handgun, much less this gun in D.C. That's the other issue. And finally, in 1993, Bill Clinton signed an executive order banning guns by civilians or others on military bases. That's part of the reason why Fort Hood happened the way that it did. So you had all of these ideas of anti-gun today. They were all in place. They were all perfectly executed. And it was a failure in this base with all the best security in the world. So the idea that somehow we can pass a law to stop crazy people, or you think that if we pass a law to get rid of this one gun that somehow he wouldn't have acted today. He did bring another gun with him, by the way, which was also against the law in D.C. It's not working, Piers. That's the problem.
Okay, I'll tell you what isn't working is the failure to do anything to even clamp down on AR-15s. Richard Feldman, here are some statistics for you. This is from Mother Jones, who analysed the mass shootings in America going back to 1982. There have now been 67 mass shootings. They based this on the FBI clarification of 4 or more people killed, and they've chosen a criteria of by a single shooter in an outdoor scenario. 67 mass shootings in America since 1982. 30 of those have occurred since 2006. 7 in 2012 alone, and 5 so far this year. So a dramatic escalation in mass shootings in America in the last 7 or 8 years or so. Why do you think there's not a problem here?
Well, there is a problem here, Pierce. What our failure as a nation is to even talk about the complexity of the problem. You know, Pierce, after the tragedy last year at Sandy Hook, everyone seemed to have as one of their talking points mental health. And as soon as we said mental health, that was check. But we never had an adult conversation in this country about the problems with our mental health system. And just earlier today, I was speaking with Dr. Cedric Alexander, the chief of police in DeKalb County, Georgia, where there was a shooting incident 2 weeks ago that didn't lead to any injuries. And he was, you know, frustrated, as millions and millions of Americans are, that we sort of lose track with the problem, and instead of staying focused on the problem, we start talking about the particular type of gun used, as though being shot with a different type of gun would somehow be better or worse, instead of focusing on the problem.
But the real problem, though, isn't it, John Lott, and you and I have debated this after almost every mass shooting in the last 3 years, is that you guys just never accept that the gun itself can ever be part of the problem. In fact, your answer to all these shootings is arm more people. Now, let's take what happened today, because the NRA has been curiously silent today. NRA doesn't want to say anything about this, and here's why. Because the Washington Navy Yard is heavily secure. It is crawling in armed security people, armed police. And yet it was still infiltrated by a man with a legally purchased AR-15 who just committed the same kind of atrocity as we saw at Sandy Hook and Aurora. And yet I'm sure, John Lott, you're going to explain to me now why the solution is not to deal with that gun, which keeps being used to do these atrocities, but is to arm even more people in that building. Is that right?
In this case.
I would agree with Ben earlier, and I would say I'd go even further, and that is when you go and ban guns from certain areas, when you don't allow our soldiers or naval officers to be able to go and carry guns, you actually create a magnet for these types of attacks to occur. I have to say the numbers that you're using for Mother Jones are simply wrong.
A gunman appeared with an assault rifle, several other weapons. At the end of it, 12 innocent people died. Another dozen or so seriously injured. How did he get these weapons into this Navy Yard? An assault rifle and other firearms.
Again, never happened. Senator Durbin wasn't alone. Other left-wing politicians seized upon the massacre to hammer home their anti-gun agenda. Here's how bad it really was. The New York Daily News ran a front-page headline which read, "Same gun, different sleigh," in reference to the Colorado theater shooting and the Sandy Hook massacre. But it wasn't the same gun. MSNBC made a big deal about the killer having an AR-15 semi-automatic weapon, but that was false. To be fair, Fox News also misreported the AR-15, but we didn't celebrate it. The Los Angeles Times reported that the killer engaged in a running gun battle with Navy security guards while carrying the AR-15, again false. Washington Post editorial board asked how the killer got the assault rifle into the Navy Yard, but he didn't do that. New York Times and CNN also referenced the AR-15 falsely. Now, everybody makes mistakes, but this was a coordinated effort, kind of a hysterical reaction. There's no question the American media is opposing the majority of Americans over the Second Amendment. And the reason is that most journalists live in secure places. Here in New York City, many press people live in high-rise apartment buildings, protected from intruders. But most Americans don't have the money to do that, so they must protect themselves. That's why the Founding Fathers put the Second Amendment into the Constitution, self-protection. Once again, when Americans lose their lives to violent crime, that situation should never, ever be exploited for political gain. And that's a memo. Now for the top story tonight, reaction. Joining us from Washington, Howard Kurtz, host of the brand new program here on the Fox News Channel called Media Buzz. So where am I going wrong, Howard?
Well, Bill, you're obviously right that this was a terrible blunder by the mainstream media, including Fox, and that we have seen this too many times with mass shootings and mass tragedies where journalists take half-baked information from law enforcement sources, report it as fact, and then it turns out not to be true. But I don't think, and you're certainly right, that Piers Morgan at CNN and others are crusaders on the gun control issue, but I certainly don't think it's fair to say that all of the mainstream media is comprised of people who are anti-Second Amendment fanatics.
Are you kidding me, Howard? I mean, didn't you just not hear every major network, all right, all the newspapers? I mean, am I hallucinating here? They all jumped on the AR-15. They all linked it to Colorado and to Connecticut. All of them did the same thing. It was like one guy writing a script for all of them. And you're going to sit there and tell me that this isn't a coordinated effort?
If you are basing your reports on the erroneous information that there was an AR-15 assault weapon
But it's what they did with the information. You just referenced Fox made the mistake. But Fox didn't reference it that way. We weren't coming out going, this is outrage, another assault rifle involved in a mass killing. We didn't do that. We just said the report that the AR-15 was used. Now, Yes, that was a mistake, but it wasn't seized upon to push an agenda. Surely you see the agenda.
Well, if a journalist asks, how in the world did Aaron Alexis get an automatic weapon into a protected military base?
That's a legitimate question, but it was always preferenced by, here we go again. All right, here's another rifle and a madman with a rifle. And the reason it was preferenced that way was to whip up feeling against the Second Amendment. Surely you know that.
I think many people in the press believe there should be a reasonable and robust debate about gun control. We saw that particularly after Newtown.
We've already had the debate, Howard.
We have had that debate.
And it's done.
President Obama and his side lost.
That's right.
True.
The debate has been had.
But
but they're not going to stop. Look, they did the same thing on gay marriage, and they won. Same thing. They won. All right?
They won
same
because
thing on
public
abortion.
opinion changed.
Same thing on abortion, and they won. But they didn't win on this, but they're not going to try to stop.
The debate has been about, and even Republican Senator Pat Toomey signed on to this, whether there should be limits on high-capacity magazines and background checks at gun shows.
And they
yes,
lost.
They lost. But I don't think it's unreasonable to debate that as opposed to you're painting it as they don't want guns on the streets.
I'm painting it as an anti-Second Amendment play. That's what it is. Because they want to erode the Second Amendment down to, well, you can have this gun with this many bullets. This is what you can have, when everybody's circumstance is different. It's a lot easier not to have a gun in New York City if you have means, like I do, all right, than it is to be down in Harlingen, Texas on the border. Well, yet these people would have the same rules for everybody. Let the states do it.
But this notion that that journalists live in these protected areas, therefore they look at it differently than most Americans, that wouldn't be the case if you were in a movie theater in Aurora, Colorado, or if your kids went to school in Newtown, Connecticut.
That's not the psychology, Howard.
Nobody is safe from mass murderers and crazy people.
Let me ask you a personal question. You worked at the Washington Post for a long time, okay? If you took a little vote in the Washington Post newsroom, how many people would say the Second Amendment should be either outright abolished or there should be all kinds of restrictions? 90%? 85%? How many?
I think most people at the Washington Post and other news organizations would say there shouldn't be any interference with hunters or legitimate gun owning, but some of this assault weapon stuff
they define legitimate gun owning in a very narrow, restrictive way. And you know that. And you know they all have the same mindset, and they have the same mindset on gay marriage, abortion, on everything. And you're sitting there telling me that they didn't seize this yesterday as a way to advance their agenda. Do you really believe that?
Some commentators obviously seized it and politicized it, but you're an open-minded guy, and you seem to be saying that any discussion at all of any reasonable gun restrictions amounts to being anti-Second Amendment.
They exploited those mass killings yesterday for a political agenda. That's what they did. They did it all over the place. We proved our point. But I'm glad you came on with some dissent, because that's what we want here on The Factor.
Appreciate you having me.
Thank you. And you can see Media Buzz with Howard Kurtz on Sunday at 11 Eastern Time, Sunday morning.